I was elbow deep in a supply closet at the ICU nurse's station when my phone buzzed against my thigh for the third time in a row. I almost ignored it. We were short-staffed that Tuesday. We were always short-staffed that winter, and I had 2 post-op patients to check on before the end of my shift, but something made me pull off one glove and look. 3 missed calls, all from my aunt's lawyer. I stepped into the hallway and called back. He picked up on the first ring. "I'm sorry to reach you at work," he said, "but I need you to come in as soon as you're available. There's been a development regarding your Aunt Cecile's estate." I leaned against the wall. Down the corridor, a monitor beeped. Someone's IV alarm went off and was silenced. The ordinary sounds of a Tuesday afternoon. "She passed on Sunday," I said. "I know. I was there." "Yes," he said. "I know you were. That's part of what I need to discuss with you." My Aunt Cecile had never married. She lived in a 3-story Victorian in Westmount, Montreal, that she'd bought in 1989 for what she called almost nothing, and what everyone else called $430,000. She had a cat named Biscuit, who hated everyone except her, a subscription to the print edition of Le Devoir that she actually read cover to cover, and opinions about architecture so strong she once refused to enter a restaurant because of its dropped ceilings. She was, as my father had said more than once, a lot. He didn't mean it as a compliment. Cecile was my mother's aunt, technically, my great-aunt, but the gap in their ages was small enough that they'd grown up more like sisters, or they had, once. By the time I was born, something had shifted between them. I never knew the full story. I just knew that Cecile came to my parents' dinner parties and left early, that she sent me thoughtful birthday cards with books tucked inside, while my mother smiled tightly and said something about Cecile always needing to be different. I loved her. I had loved her since I was 8 years old, and she took me to the Musée des Beaux-Arts, and didn't once tell me to stop asking questions. When she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2016, I was the one who started driving out to Westmount on Sunday afternoons. My mother said it was too hard to see her like that. My father said it was a long way to drive. My brother Cormac said he would go when things stabilized, which is what Cormac always said about everything. And things never did stabilize, and he never did go. So I went. Every Sunday for 8 years I went. I brought her real croissants from the bakery on Monkland, because she could tell the difference, and she deserved the real ones. I sat with her while she still knew who I was, and then while she half knew, and then while she sometimes looked at me and said, very politely, "I'm sorry, have we met?" I held her hand. I watched old films with her. I learned which nurses called her by her preferred name and which ones didn't. And I had a very direct conversation with the administrator about the ones who didn't. I was there when she died. It was a Sunday, which felt right somehow. She passed quietly, in the morning, with the light coming through the window the way it does in March, thin and pale and almost tentative. The lawyer called 3 days later. His office was on Sherbrooke, 4th floor, overlooking the street. He was a small man in his 60s with wire-framed glasses, and a manner that suggested he had delivered both very good news and very bad news many times, and he'd learned to let neither show on his face until he was ready. He let me get settled. He offered coffee. I said yes, because I was coming off a night shift and I needed it. Then he opened the folder in front of him and told me that my Aunt Cecile had left me everything. The house in Westmount. The investment portfolio she'd been quietly building since the 1980s, the contents of her accounts, the biscuit, if I wanted him, though he noted the cat was elderly and had certain medical needs. I stared at him. "Everything," I said. "Everything," he said. "The total estimated value, including the property at current market, is approximately $22 million. The coffee cup was in my hand. I set it down very carefully. "My mother doesn't know about this," I said. It wasn't a question. I could tell by the way he was looking at me, carefully, steadily, that no, my mother did not know. "Your aunt's instructions were clear," he said. "She wanted you informed first. She was aware this might create some difficulty within your family." Difficulty. That was one word for it. I did not tell my parents that day. I drove home to my apartment in NDG, the one with the radiator that clanged all winter, and the kitchen window that stuck in the view of my neighbor's very ambitious container garden, and I sat at my table with Cecile's file in front of me, and I thought about what I was about to walk into. My mother would take it personally. She always did, with Cecile. Everything Cecile did was a statement, a verdict, a deliberate choice made to communicate something about my mother's worth. Cecile dying and leaving her estate to me would be experienced as a final insult, something delivered from beyond the grave, and my mother would spend considerable energies explaining why she was the real victim of this situation. My father would calculate. He always calculated. He would work out what $22 million meant for the family, for his plans, for the number he was currently short on his commercial real estate project in Laval, that my parents had been quietly stressed out for the better part of 2 years. And Cormac, my brother Cormac, with his MBA from McGill and his condo in Griffintown that he'd leveraged twice, and his habit of describing everything in terms of what it was worth, what it could return, what the smart move was. Cormac, who had not visited Cecile once in 8 years, not even at the end, but who had nevertheless spent years referring to her house as that property in Westmount, in a tone that suggested he was already spending it. I called my mother the next morning. She left it to you, my mother said. Not a question. Not quite. Something between devastation and fury, flattened into 4 words. Yes, I said. All of it, Olive. There was a silence. I knew this silence. It was the silence that preceded the restructuring. The moment where the story got quietly rearranged into one where my mother was at the center, where whatever had happened to her, where her feelings were the relevant feelings. I don't understand, she said finally. After everything we were family. We were close. We were like sisters growing up. I know, I said. I just don't understand what I did. There it was, I said, gently, that I didn't think it was about anything she had done, that Cecile had made her own choices, that I had been visiting every Sunday, and maybe that had mattered to her. I said all of this as carefully as I could, and it landed exactly the way I'd expected, which was badly. So it's because of you, my mother said. You going out there and making yourself indispensable. I didn't say anything. I couldn't go, she said. It was too painful for me. You know that. You know how hard it was for me to see her like that. I know, I said. And now you're being rewarded for it, like I had a choice. I stayed quiet. There wasn't a version of this conversation where my words helped. My father called an hour later. His tone was different. Brisk. Practical. The tone he used in meetings. He said he thought the best thing would be for the family to sit down together and figure out a fair path forward. He said Cecile hadn't been well for years, that it was possible she hadn't understood what she was doing, that a will executed during cognitive decline was worth looking at carefully. She had legal capacity when she updated the will, I said. It was 6 years ago. Her lawyer confirmed it. Still, my father said. There's nothing to look at, I said. He paused. I've put a lot into this family, he said, and his voice shifted, dropped, became something that was trying to be tender and was also, underneath, a warning. Everything I've done has been for this family. I just think it's worth having a conversation about what's fair. I'll think about it, I said. I had already decided I wasn't going to give them anything. But I hadn't said it out loud yet, and I wasn't ready to, because once I said it out loud there would be no going back. Cormac came to my apartment 3 days later. He didn't call ahead. He texted, "Can I come by?" as he was already parking, which was Cormac's version of asking. He sat at my kitchen table. The same table where I'd sat with the lawyer's file, and he talked for 45 minutes about opportunity. About family legacy, about what Cecile would have wanted for the family as a whole. About how it made more sense for the money to be managed by someone with financial expertise. About a specific project in Laval that was, he said, just temporarily underfunded, and had excellent projected returns. I let him talk. I had learned a long time ago that interrupting Cormac was pointless. He had a deep reservoir, and he needed to empty it before he could hear anything. When he finally stopped, I asked him one question. How many times did you visit her? He looked at me. In the 8 years after her diagnosis, I said. How many times did you go out to Westmount? He was quiet. I was busy, he said. You know I was busy. I was building something. She asked about you, I said. Even when she couldn't remember most things, she would sometimes ask if the tall boy was coming. I didn't tell her you weren't. Cormac looked at the table. He was quiet for a long time. And then, because he was Cormac, he said, "That's not the point." I know, I said. That's okay. I think it's the point for me. He left. He didn't slam the door, but it was a close thing. 3 weeks later, I moved into the house in Westmount. I want to say that decision was easy, but it wasn't. The house was large. Too large for one person, I kept thinking, though Cecile had lived alone there for 30 years and had never seemed bothered. It had that smell of old houses, wood and wool and something vaguely floral, and every room had some artifact of her that I didn't know what to do with yet. Her books, floor to ceiling in the study, her collection of ceramic birds, a drawer in the kitchen full of takeout menus from restaurants that had been closed for a decade. I brought Biscuit. He was 14 and had kidney disease and required subcutaneous fluids twice a week, which it turned out I was extremely qualified to administer. He spent the first week behind the washing machine, and then came out and claimed the armchair by the front window as if he'd always owned it, which I suppose in some sense, he had. I did not hear from my parents for almost 3 weeks after the move. I told myself I was fine with this. I mostly was. Then my mother called. She had heard. I don't know how, perhaps from Cormac, perhaps from someone in the family network that operated like a nervous system, transmitting information faster than I could control. That I had moved in. Her voice on the phone was very calm, which was never a good sign with my mother. "We need to talk about Cecile's things," she said. "What about them?" I said. "There are family pieces in that house. Things that should go to the family." "Everything in the house is mine," I said. "It was included in the estate. Symbolically it's family property," she said. The silver tea set, the brooch collection. Those are Callaway pieces. They came from your grandmother. My grandmother, her mother, my great-grandmother, Cecile's mother, who had left those pieces to Cecile. I'll think about it, I said. This had become my holding phrase. A way of not saying no yet while also not saying see. What I didn't know was that my mother had already decided not to wait. I found out from the housekeeper. Her name was Morel. She had been coming to the house every Tuesday for 11 years. And she had a key. And she had kept coming even after I moved in because I asked her to. And because she and I had formed a quiet alliance during those Sunday visits over the years. She called me on a Wednesday morning while I was at the hospital. I think you need to come by, she said. Or, at least, I wanted to let you know, your mother was here yesterday. With your father, I let them in because I didn't know what to do. I'm sorry, I kept my voice even. What did they take? A pause. The brooch collection, she said, and the silver tea set, and I think some things from the upstairs closet. There was a box. I'm not sure what was in it. I thanked her. I hung up. I stood in the hospital corridor for a moment and breathed. Then I called the lawyer. The thing about Cecile was that she had been meticulous. This was true about everything in her life, but it was particularly true about the house and its contents. She had, it turned out, worked with the lawyer several years ago to document the significant items. Photographs, descriptions, appraised values, all on file. The brooch collection was in there. The silver was in there. Every piece was catalogued. My parents had walked into a house that had a paper trail for every item of significance. The lawyer was measured when I spoke to him. He said that what my parents had done constituted theft. The items were legally part of the estate, which meant they were legally mine, regardless of their feelings about symbolic family ownership. He said I had options. I could pursue a civil claim. I could involve the police. They're my parents, I said. Yes, he said carefully. What happens if I call the police? He explained what would happen, precisely and without editorializing. It was, he said, my decision. I called my mother. I need you to return everything you took from the house, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I had thought about how I wanted to do this, and I had decided I was going to be calm. Not cold, but clear. All of it. The brooches, the silver, the box from the upstairs closet. I need it back within 48 hours. We didn't take anything, my mother said. We collected a few family items that… Maril was there, I said. And there are security cameras. Cecile had installed a security system 2 years before her diagnosis. I'd had it updated when I moved in. I had footage. My mother was quiet. I have 2 options, I said. You return everything and we don't discuss it further. Or I pursue this legally. Those are the options. You would do that to your own family, she said. I'm giving you the chance not to find out, I said. Another silence. Longer this time. I'll have your father bring things over, she said finally. Her voice had gone very flat. I hope you understand what you're doing to this family. I do, I said. My father came the next evening with 2 boxes. He carried them in and set them on the hallway table and didn't quite meet my eyes. He looked older, I thought. Or maybe I was just seeing him more clearly than I used to. There was something I had been waiting to bring up, and I decided that evening was the time. When Cecile's estate was settled, the lawyer had discovered something I hadn't known about. A promissory note signed by my father 12 years earlier. He had borrowed $240,000 from Cecile. The loan had a structured repayment schedule. Not a single payment had ever been made. Under the terms of the estate, that debt now belonged to me. I had consulted with the lawyer. I had consulted with a second lawyer. I had thought about it for 3 weeks. And I had decided I was going to enforce it. I need to discuss the loan, I said. My father looked at the boxes, then at me. That was between me and Cecile, he said. It was, I said. And now Cecile's estate is mine and the loan is part of it. You signed a promissory note. The repayment schedule is in the documents. I handed him a copy. I'm not going to demand it all at once, but we need to set up a payment arrangement. He took the paper. He didn't look at it. This is how you treat your father, he said. I thought about Sundays. I thought about croissants from Monkland. I thought about sitting beside a hospital bed, holding a hand that sometimes knew who I was and sometimes didn't, and showing up anyway. I'm treating you the way you treated a signed legal document, I said. Which I think is fair. He left without saying anything else. I want to be honest about what came after. Because it wasn't triumphant. It wasn't a clean resolution that arrived all at once and stayed clean. My mother stopped calling for about 2 months. Then she started calling again, occasionally, about nothing in particular. She'd seen something on the news. She was making a recipe. Did I remember the name of that restaurant we went to when I was 12? Like nothing had happened. Like we were just resuming. I took those calls. I kept them short. I was working out, slowly, what kind of relationship I was willing to have with her, and I hadn't entirely figured it out yet. Cormac came to me 6 months after that initial conversation. He came properly this time. Called ahead, asked if we could have coffee. He looked tired. He sat at my kitchen table and didn't try to convince me of anything. He said he'd been thinking about what I'd asked him. About the visits. He said he didn't have an excuse that was worth anything, and he knew that. He said he was sorry he hadn't gone, and that he was sorry he had come to me the way he had, trying to leverage a grief I had earned into a financial conversation he had no business having. I believed him. I don't mean that naively. I know Cormac well enough to know he has complicated motivations and that an apology from him is not a simple thing. But he looked at me when he said it, and it was real. We didn't become close overnight. But something shifted. The house took me most of a year to settle into. I kept the books. I kept the ceramic birds, even though they are objectively a lot of ceramic birds. I found someone to restore the framed poster she had in the upstairs hallway. A print from a 1974 exhibition at the Musée, and I reframed it properly and put it back where it had been. I kept teaching Morel where things were. What had changed, what stayed the same. She told me stories about Cecile from the years before I started visiting, things I hadn't known. The way she'd sometimes sit at the kitchen table in the mornings with 3 newspapers, her reading glasses pushed up on her head, talking back to them. The time she hosted a dinner party for 12 and spent 2 weeks in advance reading cookbooks, and then served, entirely from scratch, a 5-course French dinner that received a standing ovation. She was proud of you, Mireille told me once, near the end of one of those Tuesday mornings. She talked about you a lot, about the nurse who came on Sundays. I had to look out the window for a moment. Did she know why I kept coming? I asked. I think she did, Mireille said. I think that's why she kept asking for you. I stayed at the hospital. I know that surprises people. I know, because they tell me, usually with a kind of delighted confusion, as if they're waiting for the second part of the sentence where I explain that I'm leaving. $22 million and she's still doing night shifts. I understand why it's surprising. But I got into nursing because I wanted to. Because I am, it turns out, someone who finds meaning in showing up for people at the hardest points of their lives. That doesn't go away because my financial situation changed. If anything, I feel it more clearly now, the way you see things more clearly once a fog lifts. I am not doing this because I have to. I am doing this because it is what I would choose. I set up a fund through the hospital foundation. It supports nursing staff pursuing advanced certifications and covers patient care supplies for people who can't afford them. It's not named after me. It's named after Cecile. Her full name, Cecile Marguerite Fontenot, which she always said was too long, and which I always thought was perfect. The repayment schedule with my father is progressing. Slowly, but it is progressing. There have been no more conversations about what's fair or what the family deserves. I don't know if that silence is an acceptance or just an exhaustion, and I've decided I don't need to know. The loan, when it's fully repaid, will go into the foundation. I think she would have liked that. There's a garden behind the house. Cecile wasn't a gardener. She would have been the first to tell you that. But she had kept a rose hedge along the back fence for reasons she never explained, and it had gone a bit wild over the years. Last May, I hired someone to come and sort it out properly. She, the gardener, a laconic woman from Verdun who communicated primarily in considering silences, spent 4 hours assessing it, and then told me the bones were good. Just needed attention. I've been learning. I don't really know what I'm doing yet, but I come out on Saturday mornings with coffee, and I look at it, and I try to notice what's changed. Biscuit comes out with me sometimes, which the vet says is fine as long as I supervise him. He finds a patch of sun and sits in it with the complete moral certainty of an animal who has done nothing wrong his entire life and knows it. I think about Cecile out there. I think about her at 28, buying this house for what she called almost nothing. I think about what she was building toward, all those years, and how she did it quietly, and how she found a way to make sure it landed somewhere it would mean something. She chose me. I didn't understand why, for a long time. I think I'm starting to.